I sat in my car outside the house I'd poured 42 years of my life into, watching my son change the locks. The metallic click of the new deadbolt sliding into place felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but I refused to let him see me cry. Not anymore. Little did he know, the woman he'd just thrown onto the street was about to walk into a life that would make him wish he'd thought twice before siding with that venomous wife of his. My name is Diane Patterson, and this is the story of how losing everything taught me I'd never really had anything worth keeping in the first place. The morning had started like any other Thursday. I'd gotten up at 6, made coffee in the kitchen where I'd raised 3 children, and watered the roses by the front porch that I'd planted when my youngest, Daniel, was still in diapers. The house on Maple Street wasn't just brick and mortar to me. It was every birthday cake I'd baked, every scraped knee I'd bandaged, every Christmas morning I'd orchestrated with military precision to make sure my children woke up to magic. My late husband Richard and I had bought it in 1983, back when our hair was dark and our dreams were bright, back when we thought we had forever. Richard died 4 years ago, sudden and cruel, a heart attack at 63 while raking leaves in the backyard. One moment he was teasing me about my obsession with keeping the gutters clean. The next he was on the ground, and no amount of CPR or prayers or desperate screaming could bring him back. The grief had nearly killed me too, but I'd survived because I had my children. Or so I thought. My daughter Emma lived in Seattle with her family, and we talked every Sunday like clockwork. My middle son Jacob had moved to Texas for work, but he called on holidays and birthdays, and that was enough. But Daniel, my youngest at 34, he'd stayed close. Too close as it turned out. Daniel married Vanessa 3 years ago, and from the moment I met her, something in my gut twisted. She had that smile, you know the kind I'm talking about, the one that looks perfect in photographs but never quite reaches the eyes. She was beautiful in that calculated way, every hair in place, every outfit coordinated, every word measured and sweet as poisoned honey. But I was his mother, and mothers know things. We feel things in our bones that others miss. I kept my mouth shut though because Richard had always told me, "Diane, you've got to let them make their own mistakes." So I smiled at their wedding, I welcomed her into the family, and I swallowed every warning that tried to crawl up my throat. The trouble started small, the way poison always does. Vanessa would make little comments about how the house was too big for just me, how it must be so much work to maintain. How wouldn't I be happier in a nice little apartment where I wouldn't have to worry about repairs and yard work? She'd say it with that concerned face, touching my arm like she genuinely cared, but I could hear what she wasn't saying. She wanted the house. Or more specifically, she wanted me out of Daniel's inheritance picture while I was still breathing. Then came the suggestions that Daniel should have power of attorney over my finances, just to make things easier for me. That I should consider signing over the deed to the house to him for tax purposes, some nonsense she'd read on the internet about estate planning. Every Sunday dinner at their place, just 10 minutes away from my home, became an interrogation disguised as concern. "Mom, are you sure you're taking your medications? Mom, you seem confused lately. Mom, we're just worried about you living alone." I wasn't confused. My mind was sharp as ever. I still did the crossword puzzle in ink every morning and volunteered 3 days a week at the library. But Vanessa had a way of planting seeds of doubt in Daniel's mind, and my sweet boy, my baby who used to bring me dandelions and call them roses, started looking at me differently. Like I was fragile. Like I was a problem that needed solving. Like I was already half gone. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was having my coffee when Daniel and Vanessa showed up unannounced, which should have been my first warning. Vanessa stayed in the car, another red flag, while Daniel came to the door with an envelope in his hand and guilt written all over his face. My heart sank before he even opened his mouth. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, and those 4 words have never meant anything good in the history of human conversation. He wouldn't look at me directly, kept his eyes on the envelope, on the floor, on anything but my face. That's when I knew. Whatever was coming was going to hurt. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, because even when you know the knife is coming, you still open the door. That's what mothers do. We let ourselves be hurt by the people we die for. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with algebra homework and taught him to tie his tie for prom. His hands were shaking slightly as he pulled papers from the envelope, and for a moment I felt sorry for him. He was 34 years old and still couldn't stand up to his wife, Still couldn't be the man his father had tried to raise him to be. Vanessa and I have been talking, he began, and I almost laughed. Vanessa had been talking, more like it. Daniel had been nodding along like one of those bobblehead dolls people put in their cars. We think it's time for you to consider moving into a senior living community. Somewhere with people your own age, activities, where you'd have company. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face neutral. Years of marriage had taught me how to hide what I was feeling. I'm 65, Daniel, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and this house. That's the thing, Mom, he continued, and now he did look at me, and I saw Vanessa's words coming out of his mouth. The house is too much for you. And honestly, Vanessa and I were thinking about starting a family, and we could really use the space. This house, it's got 5 bedrooms and you're just here alone. It doesn't make sense. There it was. The truth naked and ugly on my kitchen table. They wanted my house. The house Richard and I had sacrificed for, had built our lives in, had filled with love and laughter and memories. They wanted to erase me from my own history and move in before my body was even cold. This is my home, Daniel, I said quietly, and I heard my voice shake despite my best efforts. Your father and I bought this house. We raised you here. I'm not leaving. His jaw tightened and I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Anger maybe, or frustration. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We've already looked at some really nice places. Vanessa's done all the research. There's a beautiful community just 20 minutes away with a pool and a craft room, and I said no. My voice was firmer now, and I stood up from the table. This is my house, Daniel. Mine. Not yours, not Vanessa's. Mine. That's when his face changed completely. The guilt disappeared, replaced by something cold and hard that I didn't recognize. Actually, Mom, that's not entirely accurate anymore. Do you remember last year when you had that medical scare? The pneumonia. I remembered. I'd been in the hospital for a week, delirious with fever, barely conscious. Daniel had been there every day, or so I thought at the time. Now, looking at his face, I realized he'd been there for a different reason entirely. You signed some papers, he continued, and my blood ran cold. Power of attorney. For your own protection, remember? So I could handle things if you were incapacitated. No, I didn't remember signing anything like that. But I'd been so sick, so out of it, and there had been papers I vaguely recalled, something about medical decisions. I trusted him. He was my son. What did you do? I whispered. He had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second. The house is in my name now, Mom. Legally. You signed it over. And I'm giving you 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The room spun. My own son. My baby boy. The child I'd carried for 9 months, labored 18 hours to bring into this world. Nursed through every fever and nightmare and heartbreak. He'd stolen my home. You can't do this, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew he could. He had. And there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, standing up, and the worst part was that he actually looked sorry. Sorry the way you feel sorry when you step on an ant. Regretful, but not enough to change course. But it's done. Vanessa's already hired a contractor. We're moving in November 1st. He left the envelope on the table, stuffed with legal documents I couldn't bear to look at, and walked out of my house. No, his house now. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at nothing, feeling everything inside me crack and crumble like old plaster. I called Emma first, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. When I told her what happened, she was furious, threatening to fly home immediately, to hire lawyers to destroy Daniel. But we both knew the truth. If the paperwork was legal, if I'd actually signed it during my illness, we didn't have a case. And even if we did I really want to drag my son to court? Did I want to spend my remaining years fighting him? Mom, come stay with me, Emma begged. Please. You can live with us. The kids would love it. But I couldn't. Emma and her husband had their own lives, their own routines, and I'd seen too many of my friends become burdens on their children, living in guest rooms that weren't really theirs, tiptoeing around someone else's house. I loved Emma too much to do that to her. Jacob offered the same when I called him next, and I gave him the same answer. No. I would figure this out on my own. I had to. If you're liking this story so far, please hit that like button. It helps me know you're out there listening, and it means more than you could know. The next 2 weeks were a blur of packing and crying and trying to figure out where a 65-year-old woman with a fixed income goes when her son throws her out. I looked at apartments I couldn't afford, senior communities that felt like warehouses for the elderly, rooms for rent in strangers' houses. Nothing felt right. Everything felt like giving up, like admitting that my life was over, that I was just waiting around to die. Daniel came by once during those 2 weeks, ostensibly to help me pack, but really to make sure I was actually leaving. Vanessa stayed in the car as always. She never had the courage to face me directly, the coward. Daniel walked through the house with measuring tape, already planning where their furniture would go, and I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, to ask him where my son had gone, because this cold stranger couldn't possibly be the boy I'd raised. But I didn't. I just kept packing my life into boxes, wrapping up 42 years in newspaper and tape, and tried not to fall apart completely. It was during one of these packing marathons, surrounded by half-filled boxes and memories, that my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart skip. Lawrence Blackwood. I hadn't seen that name in over 40 years. Lawrence and I had grown up together in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn. We'd been inseparable as kids. Best friends who spent every summer catching fireflies and every winter building snow forts. As teenagers, that friendship had deepened into something more. Something electric and terrifying and all-consuming, the way first love always is. He'd been my first kiss under the bleachers at the high school football field. My first heartbreak when his family moved to California the summer before senior year. We'd written letters for a while, promised we'd find our way back to each other, but life happened the way it always does. I met Richard at college, fell in love in that steadier, calmer way that builds foundations instead of fires, and married him 2 years later. I heard through mutual friends that Lawrence had married too, had moved to Chicago, had built a successful business. Over the years, his memory had faded to a warm nostalgia. A what if that I occasionally wondered about but never seriously considered. And now his name was on my phone screen. Hello. I answered, my voice uncertain. Diane? Diane Patterson? Well, I'll be damned, it's really you. His voice was deeper than I remembered, weathered by time, but unmistakably Lawrence. Hearing it felt like stepping into a time machine. Lawrence? How did you even get this number? He laughed, a warm sound that made something in my chest unclench slightly. The magic of the internet and a mutual friend. I tracked down Sarah Hensley, you remember her? She gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I know it's been a lifetime. Sarah. I hadn't thought of her in years. She'd been in our friend group back in high school, and I knew she and Lawrence had stayed in touch through Facebook or whatever people use these days. It's okay, I said, and realized I meant it. It's good to hear your voice, Lawrence. It's been 43 years? 44 this December, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I've been thinking about you lately. Sarah mentioned she'd run into your daughter Emma online, saw some posts about you. I wanted to reach out, see how you were doing. I heard about Richard. I'm so sorry, Diane. I really am. Tears sprang to my eyes. A man I hadn't spoken to in over 4 decades was offering condolences for a husband I'd lost 4 years ago. And somehow it meant more than all the casseroles and sympathy cards I'd received from people who saw me every week. Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. How are you? How's your family? There was a pause, and I heard something shift in his voice. I lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer. And my kids, well, they're busy with their own lives. I'm in Boston now, retired mostly, just trying to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do with yourself when everything you built is in the rearview mirror. We talked for 2 hours that first call. Poured out of me everything. The grief over Richard, the betrayal by Daniel, the shock of losing my home, the terror of not knowing what came next. Lawrence listened without judgment, without advice, just listened the way people rarely do anymore. And he shared too, about the loneliness of widowhood, about feeling invisible in a world that worships youth, about his own complicated relationships with his children. By the time we hung up, something had shifted inside me. I still didn't have answers, but I didn't feel quite so alone anymore. Lawrence called again the next day. And the day after that. We fell into a routine, talking every evening while I packed, sometimes for hours. He made me laugh with stories about his misadventures in retirement, his attempts at cooking that ended in smoke alarms and takeout, his battle with modern technology that left him cursing at his smartphone like it was a sentient enemy. I told him about the books I'd been reading, the volunteer work I loved at the library, the garden I'd have to leave behind. On day 26 of my 30-day eviction notice, Lawrence said something that changed everything. Come to Boston. I'd been wrapping up Richard's old record collection, and I nearly dropped the album in my hands. What? Come to Boston, he repeated. I have a house here way too big for just me. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a garden out back that's going to waste because I can't tell a rose from a weed. You need a place to live. I need company. It makes sense. Lawrence, we haven't seen each other in 44 years. You can't just invite me to move in with you because we had a few phone conversations. Why not? His voice was calm, reasonable. Diane, we're not kids anymore. We don't have time to waste dancing around things or worrying about what's proper. You need a home. I have one. You're my oldest friend. Let me help you. I should have said no. It was crazy impulsive, the kind of thing you read about in novels, not real life. But as I looked around at the boxes and the empty spaces where my furniture used to be, at the life I was packing away, I realized I had nothing left to lose. Daniel had already taken everything that mattered. What did I have to stay for? Let me think about it, I told him. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bedroom, soon to be someone else's bedroom, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. I'd be dependent on someone I barely knew anymore. What if we couldn't stand each other after a week? What if he had expectations I couldn't meet? What if this was all some elaborate scam, and I'd end up worse off than I already was? But then I thought about the alternative. Some depressing apartment where I'd grow old surrounded by strangers, watching game shows and waiting for my children to visit out of obligation. At least with Lawrence I'd have a friend. At least I'd have someone who remembered who I used to be before grief and betrayal tried to erase me. I called him the next morning. Okay, I said before I could change my mind. I'll come. But just for a trial period. A month, maybe 2. If it doesn't work out, then we'll figure something else out, he interrupted gently. No strings, no pressure. Just 2 old friends helping each other out. Deal. Deal. The last 3 days before I had to leave flew by in a frenzy of final preparations. I hired movers to put most of my furniture in storage. I wasn't ready to part with it, not yet, even though I had no idea when or if I'd have my own place again. I packed the essentials into my 12-year-old Honda, said goodbye to neighbors who cried and raged on my behalf, and tried not to look back at the house as I pulled away. Daniel was there for my departure, watching from the porch to make sure I actually left. Vanessa stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her smile victorious. I didn't give them the satisfaction of my tears. I just drove away, my chin up, my hand steady on the wheel, even though inside I was shattering into a million pieces. The drive to Boston took 7 hours. I stopped twice, once for gas and once at a rest stop where I sat in my car and let myself cry for 20 minutes. Then I washed my face, fixed my makeup and kept going. That's what you do. You keep going. Lawrence's house was in a quiet neighborhood in Newton, a suburb west of Boston. It was a beautiful old colonial, white with black shutters, surrounded by mature trees that were just starting to turn colors. He was waiting on the front porch when I pulled up, and my heart did this strange little jump when I saw him. 44 years had changed him, of course. His hair was silver now instead of the dark brown I remembered, and his face was lined with decades of living. But his eyes were the same, warm and kind, and when he smiled I saw the boy I'd known a lifetime ago. "Welcome home," he said, and something about those words made my throat tight. He helped me unload my car, insisting on carrying the heavy boxes despite my protests that he'd throw out his back. The inside of his house was warm and lived in, full of books and comfortable furniture and photographs of a life I hadn't been part of. He showed me to a bedroom on the 2nd floor, a beautiful room with windows overlooking the back garden. "This was my daughter Kelly's room," he explained. "But she lives in California now with her family. Hasn't been home in 3 years except for her mother's funeral. So it's all yours for as long as you want it." I heard the pain in his voice when he talked about his daughter, and I recognized it because I was feeling it too. The ache of children who drift away, who forget that their parents are people with hearts that break. That first night Lawrence made dinner. Well, he tried. He burned the chicken and oversalted the vegetables, and we ended up ordering pizza like a couple of teenagers. We ate at his kitchen table, drinking wine and talking, And it felt surprisingly natural. Not romantic, not yet, just comfortable. Like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. The weeks that followed fell into an easy rhythm. Lawrence was up early, a habit from his years running his business, and he'd have coffee ready when I came downstairs. We'd have breakfast together, then go our separate ways for the day. He had his routines, his golf games, and his volunteer work at the community center. I found a library nearby that needed volunteers and started spending my mornings there. We'd reconvene for dinner, taking turns cooking or ordering in on the nights when neither of us felt like making the effort. It wasn't charity, and it wasn't a romance. It was friendship, pure and simple, the kind of easy companionship that's worth more than gold when you get to our age. We talked about everything and nothing. Politics and books and the state of the world. Our marriages, both the good parts and the hard parts, because by the time you're in your 60s, you know that every marriage has both. Our children and our disappointments and our regrets. I didn't hear from Daniel. Not a call, not a text, nothing. Emma called every week, checking on me, making sure Lawrence wasn't some axe-murderer I'd met on the internet. When I finally convinced her to video call so she could meet him, she softened immediately. There's something about Lawrence that just makes people feel at ease. "Mom," Emma said after he'd excused himself to give us privacy, "you seem happy. Really happy. I haven't heard you laugh like that in years." She was right. I was happy, or at least something close to it. The betrayal still hurt, the loss of my home still ached, but it was getting easier to breathe. I was remembering who I used to be before I became just someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's problem to solve. Do you think I made the right decision moving in with Lawrence? Tell me what you think in the comments. It was November, almost 3 months after I'd moved in, when everything changed. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Lawrence's phone rang. He was in the shower, so I called up to him, but he didn't hear me. The phone kept ringing, insistent, and finally I glanced at the screen. Daniel Patterson. My son was calling Lawrence? My blood went cold. How did Daniel even have Lawrence's number? Why would he be calling? Lawrence came downstairs 10 minutes later, wrapped in his bathrobe, his hair still damp. Was that my phone I heard? It was Daniel, I said slowly, watching his face. My son Daniel. Want to explain why my son has your phone number, Lawrence? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That. I was going to tell you, I just wasn't sure when the right time was. Tell me what? My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I was suddenly terrified. Had this all been a lie? Some elaborate scheme? Was Lawrence working with Daniel somehow? Sit down, Diane, he said gently. Please. Let me explain. I sat, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Lawrence took a deep breath. After you told me what Daniel did to you, I did some research. I still have friends in Chicago who are attorneys, and I had them look into the situation. The power of attorney he used, the way he transferred the house, it was all legal technically, but it was ethically questionable at best. You were sick, vulnerable, and he took advantage of that. I know all this, I said. There's nothing I can do about it. Actually, there might be, Lawrence continued. My attorney friend looked into it more deeply, and there are grounds to challenge the transfer. It would require you to file a lawsuit against Daniel, claim undue influence and mental incapacity at the time of signing. It's a long shot, but it's possible you could get the house back. Hope flared in my chest, painful and bright. Are you serious? I am. But Diane, there's more. I also had my friend do some digging into Daniel's finances. I wanted to see if there was a pattern of this kind of behavior, any history that might help your case. And that's when things got interesting. He pulled out his laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a financial report, full of numbers and legal jargon that mostly went over my head. But Lawrence walked me through it, and with each explanation my anger grew. Daniel was broke. Not struggling broke, but drowning in debt broke. He and Vanessa had been living far beyond their means for years, maxing out credit cards, taking out loans, building a facade of success that was nothing but smoke and mirrors. They were on the verge of bankruptcy, about to lose everything. That's why they wanted my house. Not for the space, not to start a family, but because they needed to sell it to pay off their debts. They were going to sell my home? I whispered, and the betrayal hit me all over again, fresh and devastating. That's what it looks like, Lawrence said quietly. The house is worth about $600,000 in the current market. More than enough to clear their debts and start over. I'm sorry, Diane. I know this doesn't make it hurt any less. I sat there numb, staring at the numbers on the screen. My son hadn't just kicked me out because he was thoughtless or under his wife's influence. He'd kicked me out to save his own skin, to sacrifice me for his mistakes. I'd spent 34 years raising him, loving him, giving him everything I had. And he'd repaid me by stealing my home and planning to sell it like it meant nothing. Why is he calling you? I finally asked. Lawrence looked uncomfortable again. I may have had my attorney friend reach out to Daniel's attorney. Let them know that you were exploring legal options, that we had evidence of his financial situation, and that we were prepared to make things very public and very messy if he didn't agree to negotiate. I stared at Lawrence, this man I'd known forever and barely at all. You did that? For me? Of course I did, he said simply. You're my friend, Diane. And what he did to you was wrong. I couldn't just sit by and let him get away with it. The phone rang again. Daniel. This time Lawrence answered, putting it on speaker so I could hear. Mr. Blackwood? Daniel's voice sounded strained, anxious. This is Daniel Patterson. I got a call from your attorney, and I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'd like to talk about my mother's situation. Would you? Lawrence's voice was cold, harder than I'd ever heard it. Interesting that you want to talk now, after months of not bothering to check if your mother was even alive. Let me guess, you're calling because you realize you might not be able to sell that house as easily as you thought. There was silence on the other end, and I could picture Daniel's face, could imagine him struggling for words. I don't know what my mother has told you, Daniel finally said. But the situation is more complicated than it seems. She was struggling to maintain the house, and we were trying to help her. By stealing her home and throwing her out? I cut in, unable to stay quiet any longer. By taking advantage of me when I was sick and vulnerable? That's your definition of helping, Daniel. Mom. His voice cracked. Mom, you're there? I've been trying to reach you. I've called Emma. I've tried your old number. You haven't tried hard enough, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was. You changed my locks, Daniel. You kicked me out of my home without caring where I'd end up. Did you even wonder if I was okay? If I had a place to sleep? Or were you too busy planning which furniture to keep when you sold my house? Another silence, longer this time. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was small. How did you know about that? Does it matter? Lawrence interjected. What matters is that Diane knows the truth now. She knows you're broke, that you plan to sell her home to save yourselves from bankruptcy, that you lied about wanting to start a family and needing space. She knows all of it. I heard what might have been crying on the other end of the line. Mom, please. I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but Vanessa and we're in trouble. Real trouble. We're about to lose everything, and I didn't know what else to do. The house was just sitting there. And you're alone, and I thought. You thought it was okay to steal from your widowed mother to cover your own mistakes? My voice was rising now, all the hurt and anger of the past months pouring out. You thought it was okay to forge documents and throw me out and not even check if I had anywhere to go? What kind of man have you become, Daniel? Your father would be ashamed of you. That last sentence hit him like a physical blow. I heard him gasp, heard genuine sobbing now. Please, Mom. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but please don't sue me. We'll lose everything. Vanessa will leave me. I'll have nothing. And there it was, the truth beneath the truth. He wasn't crying because he'd hurt me. He was crying because he was about to face consequences for his actions. He was crying because his carefully constructed life was falling apart, and he was finally realizing that you can't steal from your own mother and expect no repercussions. Part of me, the part that had rocked him to sleep when he had bad dreams, wanted to comfort him. But a stronger part, the part that Lawrence had helped me remember existed, stayed firm. You should have thought about that before you kicked me out, I said quietly. Lawrence, I think we're done here. Lawrence ended the call and I sat there shaking. Not with anger anymore, but with something else. Power, maybe. For the first time in months, I wasn't the victim. I was the one holding the cards. What do you want to do? Lawrence asked gently. My attorney is ready to file whenever you give the word. We have a strong case. I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I want my house back? The truth was complicated. That house held 42 years of memories, But it also held grief and pain and now betrayal. Did I really want to go back there to live alone with ghosts and what-ifs? But more than that, did I want to let Daniel get away with what he'd done? Did I want to teach him that you can betray the people who love you and face no consequences? I want to talk to him, I said finally. In person. I want to look my son in the eye and hear him explain himself. Daniel drove up from Connecticut 2 days later. Lawrence offered to be there, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone. I met Daniel at a coffee shop halfway between neutral territory where neither of us had the advantage. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His hand shook as he held his coffee cup. For a moment I saw my little boy again, scared and sorry, and my heart softened slightly. But then I remembered what he'd done, and I steeled myself. "Mom," he started, but I held up my hand. "Let me talk first," I said. "You owe me that much." He nodded, miserable. "When your father died, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But I was wrong. I still had you and Emma and Jacob. I still had my home, my memories, my life. And then you took it away from me. You didn't just take my house, Daniel. You took my security, my sense of safety, my ability to trust my own children. Do you understand that?" "I do," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. Vanessa, she convinced me it was the right thing to do, that you'd be happier somewhere smaller, that it made financial sense. But I see now that I was just making excuses for stealing from you. I was drowning, and I dragged you down with me instead of being a man and dealing with my own problems. Where's Vanessa now?" I asked. His face crumpled. "She left me. When she found out you might sue, when she realized the house was in jeopardy, she packed up and went to stay with her mother. She said she didn't sign up for this kind of stress. Turns out, she only wanted me when I had something to offer. I should have felt vindicated, but I just felt sad. Sad for my son who had chosen so poorly, who had destroyed his relationship with his mother for a woman who never really loved him. "I'm not going to sue you," I said, and watched relief flood his face. "But I'm not letting you keep the house either." The relief turned to confusion. "I don't understand. You're going to sign the house back over to me. You're going to undo what you did, and you're going to do it legally and properly. In return, I won't sue you, and I won't make your financial situation public. You can file for bankruptcy or work out your debts however you need to. But you're going to do it without using my home as your safety net." "But Mom, if I give back the house, I'll have nothing to bargain with. The creditors will come after everything." "Then I suggest you figure it out," I said, and there was steel in my voice I didn't know I had. "You're a grown man, Daniel. It's time you started acting like one. Your father and I didn't raise you to steal and lie and throw your mother out on the street. We raised you better than that." He was crying now, really crying, and I felt my resolve waver. But then I thought about Lawrence, about the friend who had stepped in when my own son had abandoned me, and I stayed firm. "You have 1 week to get the paperwork started," I continued. "Lawrence has an attorney who will handle everything. Once the house is back in my name, we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But not before. You need to make this right, Daniel." "And then what?" he asked, his voice breaking. "After I sign the house back, after I lose everything, what happens to us?" I reached across the table and took his hand, and he gripped it like a lifeline. "Then you figure out who you want to be. The man who steals from his mother, or the man your father tried to raise. And maybe if you choose right, there's a way forward for us. But I can't promise anything, Daniel. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." He nodded, defeated, and I stood to leave. As I walked out of that coffee shop, I felt lighter than I had in months. I wasn't anyone's victim anymore. I wasn't just surviving. I was taking control of my life again. Daniel did what I asked. Within a week, his attorney contacted Lawrence's attorney, and the paperwork began to transfer the house back into my name. It took 2 months of legal wrangling, but by January, the house on Maple Street was mine again. Legally, officially mine. But here's the funny thing. I didn't move back. By that point, I'd been living with Lawrence for 5 months, and somewhere along the way, his house had started to feel like home. Not because it was fancy or big or perfect, but because it was filled with laughter and companionship and the easy comfort of someone who knew me. Really knew me, not just as someone's mother or someone's wife, but as Diane, a woman with her own thoughts and dreams and value. Lawrence and I weren't a couple, not in the traditional sense. We had separate bedrooms, separate lives in many ways. But we were partners, friends who had found each other at exactly the right time. We cooked together and watched old movies and argued about politics and took road trips up the coast just because we could. He taught me to play chess and I taught him to garden. We volunteered together at the community center, teaching computer skills to other seniors. My children came to visit, Emma first with her whole family, eager to meet the man who had helped her mother. She hugged Lawrence so hard he laughed and said she was going to crack his ribs. Jacob came at Christmas, and watching my son and Lawrence bond over their shared love of terrible action movies made my heart swell. Even Daniel came, 6 months after signing the house back over. He came alone, Vanessa long gone. His life rebuilt slowly from the ground up. He was working 2 jobs to pay off his debts, living in a small apartment, learning to cook his own meals and do his own laundry. He was humble now, quieter, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Self-respect, maybe. Or just the hard-earned wisdom that comes from hitting bottom and realizing you have to dig yourself out. "I'm proud of you," I told him as we walked through Lawrence's garden, and I meant it. "What you did was wrong, but you're making it right. That takes courage." "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But I'm giving it to you anyway. Not because you've earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger around. It's too heavy, Daniel. And life's too short." We weren't magically fixed. There was still awkwardness between us, still hurt that needed time to heal. But we were talking, and that was a start. I decided to sell the house on Maple Street. Lawrence supported the decision, understanding that sometimes you have to let go of the past to move forward. The real estate market was good, and I got a fair price for it. I used part of the money to pay back Lawrence for his legal fees, though he tried to refuse. The rest I split 3 ways among my children, because that's what Richard would have wanted. Emma cried when she got her check. Jacob invested his. Daniel tried to refuse his, saying he didn't deserve it, but I insisted. He needed to know that I still believed in him, that he was still my son despite everything. Lawrence and I made our arrangement official, not through marriage but through partnership. We drew up legal documents making sure we both had rights to stay in the house, making sure neither of us could pull what Daniel had pulled on me. But more than that, we made a promise to each other. To be honest, to be kind, to be there for each other in whatever way we were needed. A year after I moved in, Lawrence had a health scare. A minor stroke that left him weak on one side for a few weeks. I took care of him the way he'd taken care of me when I was lost and broken. I drove him to physical therapy and made him do his exercises even when he complained and helped him shower when he was too proud to ask. And he let me, which was its own kind of trust. "You know," he said one evening as we sat on the back porch, watching fireflies in the garden just like we used to as kids. "I spent 3 years after my wife died feeling like my life was over. Like I was just running out the clock until it was my turn to go. And then you showed up, and suddenly I had a reason to get up in the morning again." "Lawrence," I started, but he shook his head. "Let me finish. I'm not saying this because I want anything from you. I'm saying it because you should know. You saved me, Diane. Just like I like to think I saved you. We saved each other." I took his hand, weathered and spotted with age like my own, and squeezed it. "We did, didn't we? So what do we call this?" he asked with a smile. "We're not married, we're not dating, but we're more than roommates." "I think," I said slowly, "we call it whatever we want. We're too old to worry about labels. Let's just call it happiness." And it was. Happy. Not perfect. Not without challenges or hard days or moments when grief still caught us off guard. But happy in the way that matters, the deep down bone level contentment of knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The story might have ended there, with me and Lawrence growing old together in comfortable companionship. But life, as I've learned, always has one more twist. It was Emma who suggested it during one of our video calls. "Mom, you should write this down. Your story, I mean. What happened with Daniel, how you found Lawrence, all of it. People need to hear stories like yours. Who wants to hear about an old woman's problems?" I laughed. "Everyone, Mom. Especially other old women who feel invisible and forgotten and like their lives are over. You're proof that it's never too late to start again." So I started writing. Just for myself at first, therapeutic rambling about betrayal and redemption and unexpected second chances. but Lawrence encouraged me to polish it, to think about sharing it. You've always been a good storyteller, he reminded me. Remember all those bedtime stories you used to make up for your kids? This is just another story, except this one is true. I submitted it to a website that collected stories from seniors, not expecting much. But it resonated. People commented, hundreds of them, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery, of children who disappointed them and friends who saved them. I started writing more, other stories from my life, observations about aging and love and family. One thing led to another, and now here I am telling you this story, hoping it means something to someone out there who might be going through what I went through, who might be sitting in a car watching their child change the locks, wondering how their life fell apart so completely. If that's you, I want you to know something. The end of one chapter isn't the end of your story. Sometimes the people we think we can count on disappoint us so badly we can't see straight. Sometimes our children forget that we're people too, with needs and dreams and value beyond what we can give them. Sometimes everything falls apart, and you feel like you're too old, too tired, too broken to start over. But you're not. You're not too old, and you're not too tired, and you are definitely not broken. You're just in a painful transition between who you were and who you're going to become. And if you're very lucky, you'll find someone, a friend or a partner or even just a kind stranger, who will remind you that your story isn't over yet. Daniel and I have rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. He comes to visit once a month now, and we're learning to be honest with each other. He's in therapy, working through his issues with money and self-worth and the way Vanessa manipulated him. I'm proud of the work he's doing, proud of the man he's becoming. He'll never be the son I thought I had, but he might become someone better, someone real. Lawrence and I are talking about taking a trip to Brooklyn, back to the neighborhood where we grew up, to see what's still there and what's changed. We want to find the high school, walk by our old houses, maybe catch fireflies if we can still move fast enough to capture them. We want to see where we came from before we make more plans for where we're going. Because that's the thing about getting older. You start to see your life as a whole story instead of just the chapter you're living in. The betrayals and the joys, the losses and the unexpected gifts, they're all part of the same narrative. And maybe the plot doesn't go the way you expected, maybe the characters you thought were your allies turn out to be something else, but that doesn't mean it's a bad story. It just means it's a real one. So yes, my son kicked me out of my house. Yes, he stole from me and betrayed me and broke my heart in ways I'm still healing from. But he also inadvertently gave me a gift. He pushed me out of a life that was comfortable but small, where I was slowly disappearing into the role of widow and mother and nothing else. He forced me to remember that I was Diane first before I was anyone's anything, and that Diane had value and strength and a whole lot of living left to do. Would I have chosen this path? No. Would I recommend betrayal and homelessness as a route to self-discovery? Absolutely not. But I can't deny that the worst thing that ever happened to me led directly to some of the best things. Lawrence, this unexpected partnership that feeds my soul. A new life in Boston with new friends and new purpose. A relationship with my children that's more honest, even if it's more complicated. And most importantly, a relationship with myself that I'd lost somewhere along the way. I'm 66 now, and I've learned that life doesn't end when your kids grow up, or when your spouse dies, or when someone steals your home out from under you. Life ends when you stop growing, when you stop being curious, when you stop believing that tomorrow might surprise you. And I'm not ready for that ending yet. Not by a long shot. If you like this story, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to get more stories from me. I've got plenty more to tell, and something tells me you'll want to hear them. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.